Good morning, everyone. As introduced, I am Mia. A little bit about myself. So I'm currently the clinical lead paediatric physiotherapist for an independent practice in southwest Wales called Equinox Physiotherapy. So if you look either myself or the clinic up, that's us on Instagram there. I started my career as a physiotech, a rehab coach, and I've worked my way up through qualifying into being now the clinical lead physio, and working alongside my practice as a physiotherapist. I volunteer weekly as an adaptive ski instructor with a charity called Ski for All Wales, where I do my best to join the more clinical side of physiotherapy with activity-based interventions in adaptive snow sports to kind of promote better outcomes for my clients. Everything that is shared within this, as obviously we've had consent to share pictures of different children, not just Mably, who this case study will follow. And this is a case study, but it's not a formal research project as such, but it's just our insights into early intervention within GAND, how we've structured it, the outcomes that we've had, and hopefully the benefits that we get for the broader community that is GAND. So Mably matters. So that's a tagline that we've come up with in terms of the work that we do with Mably, not only in physiotherapy, but our broader kind of reach that we're looking to expand across the GAND community. So I'm hoping that we can hopefully discuss the role of early physiotherapy in influencing those functional trajectories for not just Mably, but all of the Mablys in the now, is it just over 500 kind of cases of GAND across the world. So anything that we can do to share, to learn, to support and kind of influence our next steps is hopefully what we can discuss today. So Mably is the why for me being here today, and hopefully together we can, like I say, begin to broaden our knowledge and understanding for the wider GAND community. So what is GAND? We've had the absolute expert opinion on this already this morning, so this is about as detailed as my genetic insights are going to get for you. What I will do is focus on my area of expertise, which is the motor impairments. So physio-specific kind of implications. So if we look at the motor components, we know that GAND presents with kind of infantile hypotonia, delayed developmental milestones, functional activity and independence impairments, delayed sitting, crawling, walking, and what we see is that kind of ongoing gait abnormalities and unsteady kind of gait patterns. So that is absolutely physiotherapy amenable elements that we can focus on, as opposed to kind of the more genetic, science-based understanding of GAND. So as physios, we are absolutely kind of duty-bound to base all of our interventions on evidence. So what evidence do we have in GAND to actually say, well, this is the condition, this is how we're going to treat it, and this is why, what's effective, and what are we going to do? So if we explore what we've got. So direct physiotherapy intervention evidence doesn't exist. So our first step, our first check, I've got a patient coming in, whether they're diagnosed, undiagnosed, we think it might be something, actually, we don't have anything to guide us on that initial step. So another step we could take is to look at clinical guidelines. Is there anything slightly broader that exists that can maybe filter down into our professional kind of practice? Again, they don't exist. So as physios, we exist in a world of an unknown kind of guidance as far as what do we do. We have children coming in, and that first step, that first clinical guidance of actually what evidence can I apply to this child to be most effective in my intervention, we simply have no guidance at all. That doesn't, however, mean that we've got nothing that we can do. So how do we approach physiotherapy? So if we take evidence from similar neurodevelopmental conditions and early neuroplastic principles, we can then apply those in a comparable way for the benefit of the children that we're looking at. So what that creates is an approach that isn't evidence-based, but it's evidence-informed. So we can take bits of appropriate evidence and apply them on specific cases, depending on obviously how each individual is presenting. So what is the available evidence? If we don't have GAN-specific evidence, but we're looking at neurodevelopmental, neuroplastic evidence, what actually does exist? How are we going to apply evidence that we do have into a meaningful intervention for our children. So GAND presents with motor delay and hypertonia from infancy. And although there's no evidence there is a lot of evidence around cerebral palsy. So if we took the neuroplastic kind of evidence from cerebral palsy and applied it into GAND, what we do get is guidance on how interventions should be structured. So if we look at intensity, task-specific and child active, and embedded in daily life interventions, we start to get guidance on actually how are we going to structure physiotherapy that then gives us meaningful outcomes. And again, if we continue on, early intervention. So this is where we've got those early windows, infancy and that kind of early developmental stage is when we're most responsive to change. So if we can get in early, we can develop those neuroplastic changes nice and early, actually our outcomes are potentially optimized further down the line and in terms of how we're going to have lifelong change for our children. So again, there's no physiotherapy specific interventions for GAND, but if we're looking at harnessing neuroplastic change and motor learning, we start to get much better guidance on how are we actually going to target a physiotherapy intervention. So we've got early intervention, we've got neuroplasticity, and we've got motor learning. So it is biologically plausible, if we take the comparable evidence, that if we target that early window where we're most responsive to change, and we're looking at neuroplastic principles that are well evidenced across other neurodevelopmental conditions, actually we've got a plausible route that's evidence informed on how we're going to deliver physiotherapy, not just evidence-based, it's specific in GAND, which, as we know, just doesn't exist. So the early neuroplastic principles. So neuroplasticity as a concept, if you are unfamiliar, is the way the brain can change its structure and function in response to an input, whether that's an experience, movement, learning, environment, whatever it might be. If the stimulus is great enough, your brain can actually restructure itself in response to that. What we do know is that that works both ways. So what we need is the appropriate input to guide quality and positive change. If we practice negative patterns and we consistently do that, we will also get a negative loop of neuroplasticity. So where we're looking at these neuroplastic principles, actually how we apply these next steps is also very important to get that positive loop that we're looking for. So repetition, it makes sense, but the more we repeat something, the more they improve, the more we practice them. Specificity, if we're practicing what we want to improve at, we're going to improve that task. There's no point in practicing a random task or random play and hoping that that then translates into our ability to take steps or be independent. Actually, we need to be practicing the foundational movements for what we want to achieve and then progressing those through. Salience, so making it meaningful, especially when we're working with children. We can't expect them to understand that if we're just going to sit on a bench and stand up, that that's going to mean that they can do that independently and they can play. Actually, we need to scale that back into something that's meaningful for that child. If I'm sitting on the floor, but I can stand up and I can get to the toy that I want, or I can go and play with my friends, I can go and play with my mum, my dad, whoever it might be. If that is a meaningful task, the activation pathways that we get are way more meaningful, way more powerful in terms of actually triggering that neuroplastic change. Intensity. Again, the harder we're working, the more activation we're getting, but it's finding that sweet spot. So if it's too easy, we're not learning enough. If it's too hard, the chances are we're not actually going to be engaging in the task that we're asking. We're not going to be getting the responses that we want because it's just simply too hard to get the repetitions that we're looking for any meaningful change. So it's kind of that Goldilocks and the three bears, not too hot, not too cold, just right in the middle. We're working hard, but we're not over challenging and we're not being too nice and being like, this is actually really easy for you. And then the most important one is active participation. As adults and as therapists, it's very easy for us at times to want to help, to want to take over, to want to be like, oh, we can help you do this. Look, if I just hold your hand, if we can do this, if I guide you into standing, oh, look, we've achieved it. We've sat, we've stood, we've done whatever the pattern is. But actually, the more we take over, the less active participation the child gets, the less effective those neuroplastic principles are. So actually, it's about us at times taking a little bit of a step back, giving the children the opportunity to learn, to progress, at times to fail, we're not always going to get it right first time. But actually, if we're actively engaging, those motor pathways are far more improved, far more effective, and the quality repetitions that we're going to get that then feed into our repetition, our specificity and our intensities start to become a lot more effective, and the results that we're going to get are greater learning effects. So, meet Mably. So Mably came to us at Equinox aged 15 months. She's now 2.5 and is kind of in the pink pacer walking around if you've seen her this morning. On assessment, we didn't know Mably had GAND. So we had very limited information on actually why there was developmental delays, why are the gaps widening to peers, what's going on. What we did have is an MRI report provided just ahead of Christmas in 2025, where the medical team at the time said, this is the report. We don't really know what's going on, but just go home, enjoy Christmas, and there's nothing really more we can do at this point. And that's the window where Mably came to us with kind of a request of, we've got no support, we don't know what to do. How can you possibly help? Is there anything that can be done? So as an initial picture, quite a concerning time for the parents. And then we just kind of have to use the evidence that we've discussed in terms of filtering through how we look at Mably and how we're best going to support a family that at the time had this unknown diagnosis. So on assessment, Mably presented with delayed developmental milestones. So at age 15 months, she was presenting between 6 to 9 months in terms of her function. She sat typically with kind of compensation through her hips and sacral sitting. So we were really slouched where that hypotonia presents. We really dropped into sitting and kind of rested on those bony limits. So we weren't very active, even how we sat. We had asymmetrical Babinski responses, so upper motor neuron testing. We had full range of movement, but limited functional mobility. So Mably, she could sit, she could kind of pivot on the floor, but she couldn't actually reach and progress towards anything that she desired. Centrally, we had hypotonia, hypermobile, and particularly poor strength in her gluteals, her anti-gravity muscles, so what holds her up against gravity, and her shoulder girdle. So that kind of presented in a way that Mably couldn't hold herself on her hands and knees when we first assessed her. She could sit on the floor, she could be on her tummy, she could be on her back. We could roll, but actually beyond that, Mably was completely dependent at 15 months for everybody to do everything for her. So if we look at the developmental milestones, you can kind of get a little bit of a better picture on actually what Mably could achieve within that window. So at 15 months, we can't maintain hands and knees unless someone's holding her. We can't kind of progress in any form of crawling. We can roll, we can wriggle, we could pivot, but actually we're not functionally moving or doing anything that's meaningful for Mably. So that's our kind of starting picture. As physios, it's really easy for us to focus on biomedical data. What's strong, what's weak, what's short, what's long. Are things moving, are things not moving? But if we apply the ICF model, so the International Classification of Function, Disability and Health that's developed by the World Health Organization, it allows us to have a little bit more of a holistic picture of Mably. Actually, how is her activity and her participation in life affected by the biomedical components that, as physios, we can assess? So I can tell you that Mably had central hypotonia and delayed motor milestones, but actually, what does that mean? Well, she was unable to sit, roll and pivot. She can't progress towards toys. She's not keeping up with her peers. She was dependent on mum, dad, friends, whoever it may be, for everything. And at 15 months, typically, we'd want to start to see that transition in terms of more independent play. How are we more mobile? How are we doing things? So that just makes us consider Mably as a person, not just a biomedical kind of concept in terms of an assessment. So jointly, we set goals that were quite broad. So achieving milestones, increasing independent mobility, play with peers, engaging in meaningful activity, and increasing those gluteal, anti-gravity, and trunk kind of strength. So how did we do it? There's a lot of kind of information to this point, but actually, what did we do? So as a treatment plan, we started off once per month. We're an independent clinic, so obviously there's a cost associated. We're not the NHS. We have to be reasonable in kind of expectations of what families can engage with. We started once a month. Mably started to show responses, and we were fortunate enough that actually her parents were able to then transition to a more frequent approach of once per week. Her sessions were 1 hour long, and we set up a program where we had play between clinic, hydrotherapy, home sessions. We enabled kind of joint play sessions, music sessions, and adaptive skiing. So in terms of that salience, that meaningfulness of any kind of play and physical activity that we were getting, we were able to apply that across a broad variety of settings to be most effective for Mably and her early intervention. Within those physio sessions, you can see the kind of things that we focused on, but what we had to do was adapt absolutely everything to what Mably's interested in. Understandably, it seems to make sense. But again, as physios, well, no, we want to work on balance. We're going to stand now. Well, that doesn't really work when you're nearly 2 and you just want to be over there playing with something else. So at all points, we've adapted the play so that the motivation is optimized. And again, those repetitions, the intensity, the salience of what we're doing is then best applied within all of these environments. So joint sessions and peer play. We are quite fortunate that we've got a broad variety of kind of opportunities that maybe typically within the NHS you don't have access to as part of your day-to-day job. So what we have done is joined up physio sessions with peers for Mably and other little children. So you can see Mably on the left here is actually working on her standing, where Lucy, her best friend, is actually just transitioning from kind of a perched stand. So we can grade the play, but we're getting that social interaction. We're getting meaningful kind of interaction within kind of the gross motor practice and those repetitions that we're looking for. Again, joint music sessions and ski sessions, actually we can take an activity and target gross motor patterns. So wherever kind of your impairment, your function lays, actually we can transition the things that we want to be working on outside of a clinic. We don't always need to be based on this kind of biomedical model of we're going to work on strength, so we're going to do lots and lots of strengthening exercises. Actually, it's way more effective to be stood to a drum playing with your friends than it is kind of sitting and standing from a bench or just standing and hoping that kind of the repetition of that is going to be effective for you. So progress for Mably. So we worked really hard that we had a home exercise program that gave us increased repetitions between sessions. So this is us, I think about a fortnight after an initial assessment in low kneeling. So Mably's bum is on her heels. She's supported, she's got a table in front. We were really struggling. That's full support from me just to enable play to a table. And within a year, we're high kneeling to a raised plinth with very little guidance from myself. Again, on assessment, we literally couldn't hold hands and knees. We're climbing obstacles and we're climbing up and down the stairs. So in terms of that repetition and how we're functionally changing, actually, we now have a shoulder girl that Mably can weight bear over, she can self-support, her independence is better, she's now mobile, and we're able to achieve, for Mably, what Mably wants to do. And that's the ideal. We want Mably to be functionally independent, and that's the position that we're starting to get to. Again, standing, Mably could stand with a lot of facilitation on assessment, but again, through meaningful play and kind of activity functions, we're now getting to a point where Mably can actually heel raise. So this has been a real challenge for us and something that I'll come on to in terms of one of my concerns later in the presentation. But actually the ability for Mably to push through her calf muscles and lift her heels against gravity is a huge pattern that translates into how we're actually going to progress in terms of our gait. Every step we take, we have to be able to stand on one leg and we have to be able to push off through that kind of pattern. So the transition to standing here and getting those kind of patterns for Mably has been a huge kind of success for us. Mobility. It's the one thing that we all target. We all want kind of our little ones to progress. We want them to get on their feet and we want them to walk. What I will say is the Riften Pacer for Mably has been an absolute game changer in terms of her access to independent mobility. So I've got 3 videos to show you that give us a kind of a start, a middle and an end picture of actually how we progressed with Mably's mobility. So on initial assessment, this is the Riften rep supporting me here. There's a lot of facilitation and we get one kind of independent swing through on this left step. There. And Mably's very, very happy with it. So as a beginning picture, we're literally just initiating. This is after 6 months of physio, and we're just about getting that initiation of a stepping pattern. So all of those repetitions, all of those hours of weekly physiotherapy, we're just about able to initiate one step. Fast forward another 3 months, Mably's now in her own bright pink pacer, and we're starting to get steps, but it's not very purposeful in terms of its A to B. If Mably wanted to get somewhere, we'd take a really zigzagged path. We might get there, we might not, we might need a lot of support to get there eventually, and that can be quite frustrating in that interim window. I can now walk, I've now got the freedom to, but actually I don't necessarily have the control to get where I want to get to. And then fast forward to now, and Mably absolutely takes over clinic. Ski club, you name it. Mably is everywhere in her Riften. You'll see her around here. We've developed to kicking balls, to catching, to throwing, to using the Riften to be the absolute hands-freeing device, actually. So what we found is the use of equipment for Mably particularly means that we can get her in a position where she can practice the things that we want. It's repetition, it's intense, it's salient. For Mably, it's the best neuroplastic window that we can enable. But what it means is actually mum, dad, friends at nursery, peers at ski club, actually everybody now can play with Mably and make it even more meaningful than just having to hold Mably and be her full support at all times. So again, if we're looking at structuring those kind of motor challenges and how we're going to progress anything in that early window of GAND, actually looking at equipment and how we can give the child the independence to practice and then enable things like the play is really important. So I had to share this because if we're going to talk about progressions from just about being able to sit up independently to functional independence, we took Mably to France on an adaptive ski trip in January, and we were fortunate enough that a charity, Cerebra, custom built skis for the Riften Pacer for us. And we spent a week chasing Mably around on the snow in a sit ski as well as on a Riften Pacer. So if there's not a cooler kid in a Riften Pacer, I don't know that one exists. So progress. So as of this month, we're about 6 days in. Mably is now just about achieving her 12-month milestones. So we reviewed start of this week, and you can see the difference. We were 6 to 9 months in February 25. By June 26, actually we're achieving the vast majority. The only thing really that's transitioning left to do is that independent stepping, which is understandable. We are delayed. If we consider that window and that shifting to where we are now, actually Mably's starting to independently balance, which means that the next transition is going to be those independent steps. Once we can get stable over that one side and start to take those steps. What we have also looked at is a more objective outcome. So for those of you who maybe aren't familiar, the GMFM is a standardised outcome measure that's validated in cerebral palsy, but it offers subsections of insight for us to kind of really quantify how children are moving and how they're progressing. So we move through things like sitting, crawling and kneeling, lying and rolling, standing, stepping, running, walking, jumping. So between September 25, October 25 and June 26, you can see that Mably's consistently improving in her sitting performance. The same applies across her crawling and kneeling, her standing, and her walking, running and jumping, just to confirm we're not running and jumping, but those initial sections where actually we're starting to take steps, we're decreasing our support, and we're able to turn, we're starting to achieve. So as far as objective insights, actually all of those early interventions, those neuroplastic principles, have been evidence-based as far as Mabley as a case study in improving kind of that early window within a child with GAND. So current concerns, Mabley's feet. So Mabley's foot and ankle complex is a real challenge for us at the minute. As you can see, the way Mabley kind of pronates, we've lost that medial arch. We're really everted as far as a kind of foot position comes. And what that gives us is a loss of alignment and a really poor base. So when we're looking at those transitions, can Mabley balance independently? Can we stand? That hypertonia kind of driven low tone, actually we're dropping to extremes of bony limits here to find stability, which then means when we ask a child to do anything, they've got no real active control from their muscular system in terms of what we're doing, in terms of what we're balancing. If you were to stand on your own one leg and feel it, you can feel your foot do all of these intrinsic little adjustments as you're balancing. When Mabley stands, we're not able to access any of that because we've dropped with that low tone onto a bony limit. And you can see kind of from the shape of Mabley's calf, actually, we're really slender. So we don't appear to have a real kind of calf muscle bulk. So when we're again looking at those functional changes into independent stepping, actually, we don't necessarily have the musculature there, never mind the motor pathways, to be achieving the stepping patterns that we're looking for. So we've worked closely with an independent orthotist who's come in and assessed. Mabley is now using a soft SMO, so a supramalleolar orthosis. So it comes just above her ankles and along her forefoot. But what it gives us is that alignment around her foot and ankle complex. So we're not resting on bony limits, we're not stretching ligaments, we're not out of alignment. Actually, we're in a positive alignment and we still have the ability to actually plantar flex. So where Mabley's in those splints, because they're not rigid, she can still activate through her toes and through her intrinsics to get that push off. So we've now found a happy medium. It's an early window for us. We're still seeing how we're responding, but we've gained alignment and we've gained active participation in a pattern that's going to be effective in terms of changing any kind of functional strength for Mabley to stand better, balance better, and then achieve more in terms of her independence. This is something I wanted to touch on because being part of kind of the parent groups and the things that are shared around, what we do know is that there can be kind of long-term mobility kind of concerns and mobility regressions within GAND. So identifying early any changes in alignment and strength, particularly in the musculature that would be responsible for that long-term foot and ankle complex health and then the ability to walk, could prove vital in that, again, if we address it in that early window, we're already aligned, we're already strong, we're already in appropriate orthoses. Actually, do we have a longer term prognosis in terms of mobility that's improved? So, challenges and limitations. This isn't a formal study. This is just a case study insight of how we've taken evidence that does exist, evidence informed, those kind of comparable neurodevelopmental research papers, and applied it to a case that doesn't have any kind of formal evidence. So we are a single case study. We can't apply Mabley's case broadly and say this is definitely going to work, but actually we've applied kind of evidence-based principles into GAND and it's proven effective. There is a question, is it just natural development? Is it physio? We're never really going to know, but ultimately we've applied evidence-informed kind of principles. We've seen the benefits, and that's worthy of note that actually in terms of physiotherapy for GAND moving forward, maybe that's something that should be considered sooner. We don't have anyone to compare Mabley to. Kind of Mabley's one of 3 or 4, I think, in Wales, and there's no one of a comparable age. So in terms of us being able to kind of truly compare anything, we can't. There is a lot of variability in rare disorders, as kind of this is the expert opinion within the room. But it's not always straightforward. Mabley's cried probably about as much as she's laughed with me. But as far as principles go and structuring physiotherapy, there's definitely a case that if we can access early kind of physiotherapy within GAND, we can have meaningful kind of functional changes. So key takeaways in terms of physio for GAND. Early physio intervention may positively influence kind of those trajectories for our children. Task-specific play-based intervention improves engagement. Future research should consider the role of kind of intrinsic foot musculature and gastrosoleus strength in that long-term mobility. If we're seeing something early, can we address it early? Can we get strong? And actually, will that have any other longer-term kind of influence on the mobility within GAND? And then GAND-specific physio studies and clinical guidelines are definitely required. If anybody knows any consultant who's happy to chat to me about establishing nice guidelines, please send them my way. I would be more than happy to chat to them. And then probably my favourite picture to end on, just because it's cool. So just a huge thank you to kind of Rebecca and GAND Aid for having me here today. It's been an absolute pleasure, but a huge thank you to Mably, Gwenno and Michael for putting up with me for 18 months worth of physio and requests and please can we do this, please can we do that, can we do this more? It's been an absolute pleasure. I can't wait to see where Mably kind of progresses next. So yeah, thank you very much. If you want, yes.
I think sometimes in life, I happen to get physiotherapy for my son, and you hear the ladies speak like me, and you just realise there are good people who do go the extra mile for our children, and I think your presentation was excellent. You restore my faith in healthcare provision, so yeah, it's amazing. So anyone want to questions?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for the insight on your practice. Very wonderful. I was wondering if you have any thoughts on combining physiotherapy with nutritional supplements, especially biotin.
I will be absolutely honest, I'm not familiar with biotin. If there is evidence that it is effective and we can combine them, I'm all for that. The more streamlined we can be, the better. So if we can get two things for one, I'm all about that. That's where my adaptive ski and my physio comes in. So whether it's nutritional supplementation, activity-based, whatever it is, if the evidence is there to support it and actually we can merge things, it's just going to be more optimized for the individual. Rebecca.
So when Shane was navigating, it was very much similar, early intervention, lots of therapy, Shane and walking and whatnot before she started school. And in between we've had a few injuries, a few, she's limping, I think we had a few hip problems here and there. And I just felt that when she started school, the physio, first of all, it was intense, but a lot of it gets put on the TAs, and they're obviously not physios. I mean, they're amazing, they do amazing work with Shane, but I just felt like it come into the bit, and Shane go, well, she ended up starting school back in a pushchair because she had to fall. But October last year, we were again, she was limping, she was put her foot down, I didn't know if it was from the hip, the knee, the ankle, and I just felt that if the physio team in school was involved, obviously, because she's supposed to, they should come to me with this problem rather than me trying to go around, go back to the GPs and stuff, and eventually we're in the middle of figuring it out, but I think she has one leg a bit longer than the other, and this is what's causing the problem, and I actually chatted to Loretta about it, she said, Ryan had something similar with his hip and, trying to figure things out. You never really know what it is, I suppose, but it's just, So I suppose when it comes to that school age and Shay's 6, is there anything going forward that we can still do? Is there still things to strengthen their glutes, their hips, stairs? It's really hard getting a private physio to go into school, and Shay's HCP is quite detailed, but it's so difficult to do anything other than what's on that plan once it's there. And it's with the NHS most of the time.
Yeah, it is really tricky. We have a similar battle in Wales. So access to schools for us is really mixed. Some local authorities say yes, some it's a blanket no. So finding a programme that's effective once you're at that school age can be a real challenge. One thing I do advocate for really strongly, not just in GAND, but across kind of my client base, is establishing a physically active lifestyle. So if we're not necessarily just focused on what a physio programme says, is it delivered daily or kind of bi-weekly in school, but actually a physically active lifestyle is going to give us far more consistent physical input that then gives us the opportunity to progress and maintain than just focusing on a physio program. So the same as kind of, for example, Mably came in and has her 1 hour a week. Every week I'd be nagging Gwen to go home, and actually when she's playing, I want her in this position. If we're going to do this, I want her standing like this. I want us to access this equipment. I want us to access this physical activity. Can we do this? Can we do that? So for someone of like a school age, similar. Is there actually, whether it's play at home, is there equipment or kind of soft play stuff that we can get at home that as we're playing, we can tweak things to be a little bit more strong or a little bit more physically active just within how we're existing in our home environment? Is there clubs? Is there activities? Is there kind of teams, sports, anything that we can access that actually gives us consistent physical input? Because what we do know is evidence-based across things like cerebral palsy, actually that consistency of physical input is what's going to give us the longer term kind of change. Yeah.
Sorry, just with the orthotic,
Yep.
to get the soft splint.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we found George physio, NHS physio, input was really limited. I mean, we reviewed him twice a year, it was 6 reviews, and in that time, it's hard to kind of measure what he's achieving. And at one point, he did refer his orthotics to some kind of support shoes.
Yep.
But by the time orthotics had sent them out, I think we got about 2 weeks wear out of them, and then he outgrew them.
Yeah.
Is that something that we should kind of be pushing for more with orthotics in terms of, you know, does he need that? Because they've never ever then like contacted us following that about it. And I mean, we have been fortunate enough recently to be in a position financially, and now I've been sending George to private physio.
Yep.
And the difference in that time from having the weekly physio is amazing. Like, he's gone from just being able to sit to now he's like bumped up around.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah.
And I think it's just really frustrating sometimes because we've been arguing for years to say he needs intensive support, he needs consistency.
Yeah.
And you kind of feel like you're being let down a little bit. So it's like, do we need to be doing more in terms of pushing for that input?
Short answer, yes. The difference an orthotic can make is huge. We've had similar battles in terms of actually getting referred through the NHS. We've had to go privately. We're kind of sneaking in a back door of, we've been given these and they're kind of effective. We've shown you it works privately. Now can we maybe access kind of statutory support? I definitely nag, because if they're prescribing something, there is also a duty to one, check it still fits, it's effective, does it need replacing, does it need changing?
Was that source 5 years?
Yeah, big battle, but yeah, privately funded. But again, it's the kind of things, it shouldn't have to be a battle. Unfortunately, everything is, but you're advocating for the absolute best for your child, and I just keep going there.